I just want to thank everybody for coming and supporting us. We started mass adoption a few years ago, and every day and every year it just gets stronger. And it's a community thing, so we really appreciate it. And more importantly, I'd like to thank BJ, Larry, and David for all the support that they've shown our group, and for coming here tonight and sharing their wisdom. And I warn you guys, there might be a few F-bombs, so if you don't like that, you might have to leave.
What's up?
So I'll hand it over to these guys. But thank you for coming.
Thank you, everybody. And appreciate y'all coming out for here. Yeah.
I forgot to thank our sponsors, Bitcoin Well. They're a non-custodial exchange and wallet based out of Canada. They just entered the U.S. Recently, so they would appreciate your support. Adam, the CEO, was at our festival this year. Great company. I also want to talk about up next. Joe Consorti is here, and he's working with them for a developer founders conference at Fidelity in November. So there's some coupons out there, and we're wrapping up a general admission ticket to the development conference. So thank you, Joe, for bringing that to our attention. That's all. Sorry to interrupt.
We're a well-oiled machine here, right? No, that was great. And thank you, Jeff, for all the effort you put into this. As I said to you in the Twitter space yesterday, it's very inspirational that you just don't stop no matter what. And that's something we could teach the rest of the world. So thank you for everything you do, man. What do you want to do? You want to do an introduction of each of us? You want to just get into it? What do you want to do? Oh. Everybody knows who we are? All right. We had a couple of ideas. We thought, if we're going to sit down here and do this little fireside chat and let's just have a conversation. But what can we talk about that'll put things in kind of a positive frame? Because we always see the anger, the frustration. Hey, this guy wants to burn the Federal Reserve and all that sort of stuff. And we all do. We get it. But sometimes I think we avoid what is truly important, bringing people into the space, which is some of the positive things around Bitcoin. And I thought maybe we should talk about our own personal stories and experiences that we've had in bringing people into the space. And maybe some of the challenges we've had, like we all deal with the refutations frequently, but if we start to share it with each other, then we can talk about what strategies work best with different sorts of people. So I think from that, maybe I'm going to hand it over to you first. And let's talk about some, good experiences you've had reaching out to people, bad experience. Because I think for a lot of us, it's very interesting. My brother runs a pension fund. And when I talk to him, every time I see him, I ask him about Bitcoin, and it's, we're going to be the last ones, right? And I know you guys deal with those sorts of people as well. So I think for me, it's fascinating to know what sort of conversations do you have? And are those conversations changing now? And what sort of successes have you had?
Oh, man. Well, I guess in my case, a lot of the conversations I have are with gold people because I came into the space from the gold world. And, imagine the frustration of these gold people who have had this problem nailed for 25 or 30 years, right? And have been pushing gold and pushing silver, both of which are heavily manipulated by the feds and everybody else. And along comes this new shinier toy that's better than the thing that they believe in. And so it's extremely hard for them in many cases, particularly a case like Peter Schiff, to get over, the fact that, times are changing and there's a technology that trumps what they've got, which is not to say that what they've got is immediately worthless, because it's not. But obviously this is outperformed. It's a much better choice than gold. And so, the way I do it is I just talk about, I use a lot of different ways of coming at it. One of the first things is, well, you can't touch it. It's not physical. And I'm like, well, okay, let's go back to first principles. Before gold even existed, human beings figured out a way to keep score between one another, right? They were in caves and, I killed a mammoth, you killed a mammoth, and we put sticks on the wall. You owe me one mammoth that I killed. That's money. but it's not really money. It's just a ledger, right? So money is really just a way of keeping score. Now it can have tangible properties, like it can be a piece of paper, it can be digits on a computer screen, it can be a gold coin. But I started trying to explain it's a ledger. The goddamn thing's a ledger. And imagine you've got a digital ledger that you can trust, and that usually gets them thinking, oh, okay. I mean, that's the way I deal with the physicality thing. The way I deal with the other objection that comes up a lot, well, until more recently, was, well, yeah, okay, it's great, it's libertarian money. I love that. Yeah, I like money outside the system. I'm all for that. I read Creature from Jekyll Island. I got gold. I got silver. But the government's going to take this shit away. I mean, just forget about it. You guys are all going to get fucked because they're going to just take this shit away. And oh yeah, sorry. And so my response to that is, well, okay, in theory, but let's talk about Jason Lowery's thesis that this is the first form of money that can't be taken away. I mean, wars were fought and lives were lost over property, slavery, people, and money. Gold, cattle, etc. And here's a form of money that exists digitally, controlled by 12 words that nobody can take away. I mean, unless they get the 12 words, they'd have to torture them out of you. So, if you think the government's going to shut this thing down, sure, one government can do that, but you've got 8 billion people on the planet. You got a bunch of governments, and some other government's going to say, no, we love it, like El Salvador. And guess what? All the productive, smart people are going to move there. So and that the government issue was a bigger issue in terms of overcoming objections before the ETFs, right? As Saylor points out, ETFs did us an enormous favor. I was shocked they got approved, to be honest with you. I have a theory behind that. I think they approved them so that they could get everybody to put them within their system, because I think they're planning to 6102 the ETFs when fiat's failing. So yeah, so that's my theory, why they let it go through. And so that's why I think it's extremely important that everybody who really wants to be self-sovereign has, their own keys and has self-custody and is frankly prepared to leave the country. I mean, if I could easily see in a bad case scenario, I know we're supposed to be cheery and upbeat here, right? You got the wrong guy for that.
Because next you're going to get into success story.
Yeah, okay. You got the wrong guy for the cheery and upbeat side, okay?
Blazer check.
Yeah, exactly. Well, you got to understand when you're 67 years old and the system has been trying to F you for 47 of those years, you get cynical like I am, right? I've lived this. Okay, they've done it. I mean, I was short all the GFC companies, and they changed the rules on me. It cost me millions of dollars, right? So I mean, this because that's what they did in Canada. So the long story short is that where's it going with this? That I could see a scenario in the future where fiat is failing, and it's going to be like that meme. Why did Bitcoin shoot this dollar? I mean, it's going to be the gold people and the Bitcoin people are ruining this beautiful Keynesian fiat system that we've built, and therefore you guys are bad. You're being unpatriotic. You're not buying Liberty bonds the way you were supposed to in World War II. Gosh, that's horrible. And you know what? We're going to tax Bitcoin at 90%, and we're going to grab all these ETFs and we're going to cash you out for cash. Yeah. Okay, you got $1 million of Bitcoin in an ETF. Great, we'll send you $1 million, but we're taking the coins, right? I mean, that's a possibility. Okay, something that one has to consider. Now, in my case, hey, you got some Bitcoin? I don't know. I can't remember. I've had boating accidents, but if that happens, I'm out of this country. I mean, I just I'm on a boat or an airplane. I go somewhere else. I get my 12 words, and I'm fine. And so so that's kind of the way I look at it. But on the cheery side, I mean, I've seen people saved by this thing. I was involved with a woman in the Ron Paul movement way back when in 2008 and 9, and she got the people at PorkFest actually got her very heavily involved in Bitcoin. She bought hundreds and hundreds. She's a secretary and a graphic designer. She bought hundreds and hundreds of Bitcoin. Okay, at $2 to $4 a coin. Still has them, right? Pretty good story, right? That's a bright story, right? Yeah. I mean, I've been to these other countries, and I've read Alex's book, and I'm writing a book, and Alex's stuff is in it. And to me, I mean, this thing is a lot more than number go up, as you know. It's freedom. It's freedom from the system. It's freedom from a broken system. I mean, somebody was saying to me the other day, well, Okay, so we've got great payment rails here, Venmo, PayPal, credit cards, all that stuff. Why do you need Bitcoin? Why do you even need Lightning Network? The West doesn't need this. We've got payment rails. And I say, yeah, that's fine. But if you look at Alex's book and you read it carefully, 4 billion people in this world of 8 billion people don't have any sort of reliable money or banking.
We also don't have Venmo and Canada.
Okay.
Those are all American.
Right.
Very different.
And there are, read Alex's book, and I'm quoting some of his stuff in my book. There are numerous, hundreds and thousands of cases of people in very troubled financial situations where they've literally been saved by Bitcoin. And there are about $68 billion worth of, no, it's even more. It might be 68 worth of the fees. There are about 6 or $700 billion of remittances. So that's people from poor countries who send a relative to the States or a bigger income country to make money, then that relative turns around and sends money back to support their family. In many cases, it's literally almost life or death for that poor family, and they're sending that money back. They're usually using Western Union, some other rail, and it's 8 to 12%. That's $68 billion. Okay, and the family member who's receiving it has to walk to the bodega. Everybody knows they're going to the bodega to get money, so the criminals hang around and they jump them on the way out and steal their money and all this other stuff. If the family member can get them a smartphone, send it to them, and they can get on an internet connection, you can send a Lightning transaction for $1. This is, to me, this is the really hopeful thing. And it's why when I see, a guy like Warren Buffett describe Bitcoin as rat poison squared, which he did, I say, yeah, it is. And you're the rat, because it's going to kill your fiat ass. And so, there's a very hopeful part of this entire movement, which is it's a lot bigger than just us. And it's a lot bigger than just number go up and our net worth being better. It's going to make the world a better place. We all know that warfare occurs because the governments can print the money to pay for it. And, nobody would tolerate 70% taxes unless you live in like Sweden or something. And as a result of that, they pay for these wars with inflation. Once we take inflation away, which Bitcoin will do, they won't be able to have war anymore. And that's a fabulous thing. Think of the millions of people in this century and the prior one who died as a result of these wars. World War II killed 40 to 50 million people. And even more recently, we still see it. We see it, in the Middle East. We see it in Ukraine. It's horrible. So to me, the optimistic and hopeful thing about this, and the reason why this movement's so great, is that at every single level, it makes the world a better place. It makes you richer. It makes me richer. And that's good.
Okay, we got a little bit of
positivity, right? Yeah. So I do. Yeah, you told me there was. Yeah. So there's a silver lining. Yeah. So that's how I see it.
You go next. I'll draft behind you. Avoiding this.
I would go a little bit more positive, but yeah, you're definitely on the button. No, it's very interesting. I've spent a lot of my life in Latin America, in the third world. I almost married somebody who was Mexican many years ago, who had part of her family is very, very wealthy, and the other part, some of them were here illegally. So I've seen the dynamics of both the benefits to the ultra wealthy and the benefits to the poorest people in the world. And they're always on that hamster wheel. So I've always been doing my best to communicate to the poor people I know that it benefits you and, la ricas sort of thing, and to people who are wealthy who don't understand the trials and tribulations of being in the third world, that this is, a solution for them, because many of those people want to do good for around the world. But you also missed one big sign of hope, which is Javier Milei. But we'll get onto that afterwards.
Sorry?
Javier Milei.
Oh, yeah.
Right? Okay. David, tell us some of your positive story. You're always very positive, so this should be a lot easier for you.
Larry kind of answered the gold side of when, he and I are talking to a lot of gold bugs of how we try and convince them. I guess I'll take the tact of maybe all of us run into people in our towns and neighborhood or work, and I'm sure anecdotally it seems like to me that 98% of people don't really understand what we're doing, what this is about. So to me, as I've thought about it, it's a little bit like when you talk politics with someone, right? That, I'm not good at this, but I'm trying to get better as I get older in life of,
you don't have to win the argument, right? And I'm very guilty of this, and it's something as I've turned 50 trying to get better at it. Like it's your ego that wants to win the argument, right? Like, no, it should be Kamala or Trump. Same with Bitcoin though. Take that same tack. I guess I'd suggest that we all, and I'm giving myself this advice, go back to when you first were doubting it. I can remember arguing with Larry in 2017 about Bitcoin, saying, Larry, it's not the same as gold. And Bitcoin went to 17,000, I think, that Thanksgiving, and then went to 3,000 a couple years later. I thought, see, I was right. But boy, was I wrong. And it took me to about 2019 to maybe 18, but 19 to really see it. And I think that go back to when you were doubting, go at it from the attitude of, I don't have to strongly arm wrestle someone to believe in Bitcoin. Just deal in the facts, just lay out the facts. And to me, it's a quick macro backdrop of, U.S. money supply grows at 7%. Gold has been of value for 5,000 years because its supply grows at just under 2% on average. And Bitcoin now is less than 1%, and it's capped at 21 million. So if you start with that macro backdrop, I think the next thing you go into is, I actually wish they wouldn't call it a cryptocurrency. I think this world, you need to explain there's Bitcoin and there's crypto. And for me, the analogy I've been using is Bitcoin is like Coca-Cola, the original formula, and all these cryptos are like Tab and Dr. Pepper and Mountain Dew and Fanta. They're all knockoffs, right? Where Ethereum has the top 7 founders control 40% of the money supply, and they change the rules all the time. Sam Bankman-Fried was a gift for all of us to explain Bitcoin. I say that legitimately, meaning that guy hijacked it, FTX backdoored it, killed the money supply, and it blew up. Crypto is different than Bitcoin. And I think that's, things like that HBO documentary that recently came out. I noticed some of my neighbors were asking me about that, saying, hey, we saw that. And Adam Back. And you say, yeah. And I think these things are starting to educate people. So I'll pause there. But I think that's how I'll come at it from that angle of, I don't think that it's not our duty to change the world. They'll see it. Mr. Holbig and I were talking about that a minute ago, right? That you kind of, they'll see it, but it's our job to kind of lay out the facts, just the facts, ma'am. And so I guess that's how I think about it.
I'm looking for an area for us to have an argument and a debate. So I think maybe I found one. It's more interesting when you argue, right? From my perspective, I believe it's not the facts. The facts will never bring people into Bitcoin. You first have to prime people to be able to listen to the facts, right? Once you get them emotionally primed, then you can sell them on your idea. That's what I did in Ottawa. So for those of you, there's a couple of people here who didn't know why I'm here. We had that little trucker convoy protest in Canada. That was me and a group of people. That's the short version. Thank you. And we'll talk about Bitcoin's role in that in a bit. But when I was trying to bring people together in Ottawa, my goal was most of the people on the ground who were protesting, they were conservatives. They're coming from Alberta, Canada's Texas, and they're going to go protest Trudeau and all that sort of stuff. And my suggestion was, we're not going to go protest. We're going to go celebrate freedom. And we're going to I hearken back to when I was a kid going to Grateful Dead concerts. I needed to get that sort of vibe, peace, love, unity, and freedom, which are the words you kept hearing over and over again. Because if I could do that, then I could bring people from the other side. I always want to reach people who don't agree with me, not the people who do agree with me. And the way I try to do that is using, they call them the tools of persuasion, influence, whatever you want to call it. I'm sure you guys know Cialdini's book. And that whole area of science has grown exponentially over time. So when I was in the truck driving down here yesterday, I just jotted down a list of some of the things that I use when I try to communicate Bitcoin, the same way I was trying to communicate during the Freedom Convoy, which, by the way, wasn't my first rodeo. I've done other stuff in politics for change in Canada prior to that. That was just the first one that went international. So I jotted down a list here of 19 things, and this is going to be new for some of you, but this is something I want to bring into the Bitcoin space and have us debate and talk more openly about to help each other understand how to utilize this frame. So on one side, you have, okay, well, these are the facts of Bitcoin, but we all know when we try to convince those who are closest to us, your children, your parents, your friends, your family, they're the last people that are going to listen to you, right? As you know. But they're the people you can practice on. So instead of giving a list of facts or the attributes of Bitcoin, instead, we can use some of the tools on this list. And this is just 19 of them that I could come up with, but there's more. All right. Number 1, reciprocity. Number 2, emotional connection. Number 3, common interests. Number 4, storytelling. Number 5, anchoring. Number 6, imaginative labor. Number 7, the curiosity gap. Number 8, mirroring. Number 9, social proof. Number 10, persuasion. Number 11, mockery. Number 12, which is what you do. Number 12, visualization. Number 13, appeal to procedure. That's usually the people you want to attack. Number 4, thinking past the sale. Number 15, pacing and leading. Number 16, repetition. Number 7, the really frame. Really, the Federal Reserve is going to save you? Really, the US dollar is going to save you? Number 18, list persuasion. And number 19, entering the illusion, which is an expansion on that really frame. So the reason I bring this up is not for you to understand all of those things, but those are tactics that we can all use to emotionally connect with somebody to get them to be willing to listen to the attributes of Bitcoin. And if you can get over that hurdle, then they will listen to the attributes. And a perfect example of what I went through, and I want to hear a positive experience from you in a minute, of when you orange pilled somebody specific. But after the Freedom Convoy, in the middle of the Freedom Convoy, I also broke my ankle. I also drove my car into a tree. It was a busy week. But when I broke my ankle, 3 weeks went by, had surgery in the middle, still kept going on doing my thing. And as soon as it was done, and I got my cast off in March, I got the hell out of that communist country. And I came down here, went to Florida for a week or so, and then I went down to Colombia to spend some time with friends and learn how to walk again. When I was in Florida for about a week, I was doing Twitter Spaces because there was lots of questions, as you can imagine. And it was unbelievable. That week, because of Bitcoin's role in the Freedom Convoy, I had hundreds of people in Spaces asking me about Bitcoin, but their age demographic was their 50s and 60s. Wasn't younger people who are uncomfortable with technology. But because they were so, remember emotion, they were so emotionally affected by what the government had done to them, and they didn't understand why. During the time when they froze our bank accounts, I was in an area of Ottawa that it's the seniors area of the city. And me and my friend had somebody who worked at a Scotiabank in the neighborhood. And she said, every day, all the elderly people are coming into the branch and trying to withdraw the maximum amount of money. They don't care about politics. They're too old. They don't know what's happening. They don't know the protest. They just know the government is shutting down bank accounts. And they thought back to their parents during the Great Depression and some of the instability back then. They're like, okay, I got to get my money out. And they're just putting it under the mattress. And our Prime Minister, Blackface, caused a $1.4 trillion bank run that week that everybody in government and the media knows about, but nobody will talk about. It's their lie by omission. That week, it made it so easy for me to bring people into Bitcoin and to discuss the attributes because they were already emotionally scared. And fear is the number one state of persuasion. That's why politicians are always fear-mongering. And number two is mockery, actually. Number two is more fun when you just make fun of people or it's humor, jokes, all that sort of stuff.
Hate the mock.
That's why he does that. It's like Trump or not, he is a master persuader because he uses all these tools. And I think we can use those tools in Bitcoin as well. So that week, I remember Risa was one of the first, but Risa's a little bit younger. She's my age. She knew nothing about Bitcoin. She saw what happened. She wanted to talk to me. So she came into the space and what happened, all that sort of stuff. And first thing, after we got over the first little bit of hurdles, then she said, okay, how do I buy Bitcoin? Where do I keep it? Do I put it in a bank account? What do I do? That sort of stuff. So she was primed. And once you get somebody who's emotionally connected with somebody who's curious about something, everybody else who's watching also starts to get curious. It becomes a domino effect. This is why it's so important to connect with people emotionally on this issue. And because, as I said in the beginning, as we all know, Bitcoin has something for all socioeconomic classes. It should be easy for us to find an entry point to emotionally connect with somebody. So, give me a positive, good story of when you orange pilled someone.
Yeah, so some of you who are on Twitter might know this guy named Chris Irons who runs Quote the Raven. He does a really good job. And he and I have been friends for a long time. He put me on his podcast probably 4 or 5 years ago. And he's a gold guy. He's very close with Peter Schiff. And but he's a smart guy. No,
He's close to Peter Schiff, but
well, he didn't originally embrace Bitcoin. He was skeptical. But I knew I could get him because he was smart and he was logical. And so I guess the approach I tend to use in trying to orange pill people is just the appeal. I mean, you talk about the emotion and the influencing. I think all that's great. I try and come at it at a logical level, and kind of building the logical case for what it is and why it works and why it's important. And I said to him, I said, look, you obviously get the issue of sound money. Yep, got it. That's why you buy gold. Yep, got it. I said, okay, well, imagine, and I took him through the ledger example, and then and he said, well, but there are a lot of reasons I think why people are resistant to it, and I think one of the biggest ones, honestly, is that people use mental heuristics and they tend to look at something and they quickly form an opinion based on what they've seen in the past. And I know, the gold people in general, are very, very sensitive to fraud and fraudsters and shysters and people who do stupid stuff. And so Sam Bankman-Fried, really, really, really hurt this thing, in my opinion. To this day, I encounter very smart friends who immediately throw it in the Ponzi fraud bucket because of him. And so I spent and Chris did that. So I spent a lot of time with Chris saying, look, you need to understand that there's a lot of noise around this thing, but there's a one piece of signal here that kind of comes through all that noise. You got to ignore all that noise. I mean, like any hot emerging area. I mean, I was involved in the internet and the internet development, and pets.com was a big promote, right? I mean, selling kibble, over the internet and shipping it around the country didn't make sense. Although subsequently, our businesses like that work, but it was way too early. And what I did with Chris is I just kept working away at him logically and saying, look, here's what it is. Here's why it's true. And he had a lot of concerns. Is it really immutable? Is the computer going to crash? Is the government going to come in and take it over? I mean, all the objections are very, in any sales training course, one of the things you learn.
Notice those are all rooted in fear.
Yeah, true. Correct. But any good sales training course will teach you that you've got to overcome objections. And so, so you got to know what the objections are likely to be, and then you got to have the counterpoint to it, right? And so in Chris's case, I just kept working away at him, and eventually, and he said, the other thing is he was very turned off by Saylor's ego. He thought, right? He's like, because, yeah, that just pissed him off. Just as a general rule, he didn't like guys with a big ego, and so he got into a fight with Saylor on Twitter, and Saylor blocked him. Okay, and then, but this is the positive story of you, Phil. Yeah. I don't have any positive stories. So, but anyway, so he came to me and said, well, I really feel bad because I really treated Michael Saylor pretty, once he got it, he said, I really feel bad because I really treated Michael Saylor pretty badly. He said, I'd like him to unblock me and I'd like to tell him I actually respect him. And so I have the ability to reach out to Saylor, and I did. And I said, this guy, Chris Irons, really feels bad about what happened. And actually Saylor ended up going on one of his podcasts. So, which kind of demonstrates how much people can grow and learn, and why, if the only people that I block on Twitter are the people who are just so clearly anti-Bitcoin that they can't, they're not even willing to listen to an argument. Even Peter, I mean, I've debated him and I like him, but he's just, I don't think he's very bright is kind of my bottom line. I don't think he's got that many neurons going on. I really don't. I mean, well, because my view is if you're bright, you can't not see this. It's just so friggin' obvious, right? So anyway, it's hard to keep it positive. It really is. It's just, I wasn't built for positive.
Bitcoin is the most positive thing in the world. Okay, well, you know what? We're going to do some classes together.
It is, but we're talking about a nasty world where there's warfare and there's cheating and there's theft and there are evil fiat guys running the scene. I mean, and I know I get the kumbaya vibe that you want to achieve, okay? But my point is, that's not the fucking real world. It's just not. I mean, it's something to aim for, and I think that's where Bitcoin will take us. And I'm not opposed to any of that stuff. I mean, I'm Christian, I'm religious, but I think that we are in a spiritual war with the forces of evil. I mean, and I think to deny that is naive. And so, I actually come at it as a warrior. And, I'm gonna argue with them as much as I can. And then if they decide they want to take the other side, I'm gonna tell them to go fuck themselves. I mean,
Your wife.
yeah. Oh, sorry. Yeah. So anyway, yeah.
Chris, was that a single conversation or was it many? That's my, oh no.
This was probably, if it was 6 months, maybe even a year. Well, and no, and I mean, like as an example, Judy Shelton just wrote a book, and I was just interacting on gold, and I was just interacting, and she's a long time sound money advocate, and Trump nominated her for the Federal Reserve Board. She got in front of Congress. The way they treated her was horrible, absolutely horrible. It was despicable what they did to her, and she's become a friend, and she's a gold person, right? But I've been interacting with her for years now over Twitter and some phone calls and stuff, and and if you read her book, she's taking the orange pill. She gets it. Yeah, she gets it. And so, because she's smart. And so, and I knew with Chris, and I even said this to Schiff the last time I talked to him. I said, dude, I am going to convert you eventually. You might as well just give up. And he goes, no, you're not. And I said, I am. I'm telling you. So, because he's polite, and therefore I'll continue to debate him.
Bitcoin, I like him.
Yeah. Brent Santiago or Brent Johnson, he's anti-Bitcoin, but he's bright. And I know, all these guys will ultimately get there. I mean, the people who won't get there are the people who are just so deep in the fiat world and winning so bigly in the fiat world that it's against their self-interest to get there. I mean, I think it's a fascinating case study of the way that Larry Fink got there. I mean, he's smart. And what he must have figured, I'm sure what went down in his head is he figured out, oh my God, this thing's going to win. And I can either look wrong and fight it and try and preserve my privilege, or I can join it and make money off it. Yeah. And so he flipped and joined it. And so it's as Max says, I mean, everybody bends the knee eventually. And the whole world is going to bend the knee. So, I mean, that's a positive fact, right? I mean, that's something we can all be happy and positive about. I mean, where we are going, in my opinion, it's like beautiful. That's all Zen, okay? But meanwhile, we're kind of in the trenches,
Just one quick, and I'm going to give it over to you because I know you're always very positive, David, when we speak. So you're going to bring it home for us, please. We all, not only we all come from different backgrounds and different faiths, and we have friends from all different backgrounds and different faiths. And one of the things you mentioned is that it's a cruel world. And I'm adopted. I was born into one religion, adopted into another one, and something that's different in the religion I was raised in, where I was tortured with 14 years of religious school, is we don't have heaven and hell. Doesn't exist. What you have is just the world that we live in before you're close to God, which is after you pass away. And all the evil, the heaven and hell run simultaneously. So you'll have people around you who are the representatives of evil. And it's there for a reason. It's there to test you. It's there to show you, don't go over to the dark side, sort of thing. So when I see evil people in the world, it doesn't give me this cynicism of, oh, it's a cruel world. That's the lesson. It's the world is cruel by design, so you know to be a better person and to give back and improve the world a little bit, right? Which is what you're doing with Bitcoin, right? So, David?
Trying to think, what's the topic on?
Positivity and some positive habits and positive experiences.
Yeah. I mean, I guess for me, maybe in terms of orange pilling people, I think the thing I'm hearing listening about you guys is, we all have friends that are stubborn or neighbors or ones that are curious. And like Larry, I think just said, the Larry Finks of the world that are smart and curious, the Ray Dalios of the world that are smart and curious and ultimately got there. Ray holds about 10 to 15% of his assets in gold, but he came around on Bitcoin, whereas Peter Schiff, as Larry said, either is, not quite as bright as he thinks or just as stubborn or what. But the curious ones that you'll know will be open to that. And I think it's about, again, I laid out before how I attack it. I always turn them on and say, hey, I'm going to email you these top 3 Michael Saylor videos because I thought he was one of the better teachers that I ever learned through YouTube. And I think YouTube, it's easier to get someone to listen to that for an hour than it is to get them to read a book, just because they're busy in the world. So those are things I think about. One interesting, the old Natik, this town here, the old police chief is a guy named Dennis Mannix. And he's retired. He lives down in Naples, Florida, and he lives down in Chatham in the summer. And so I've gotten to know him down in Chatham in the Cape Cod, and he's a great guy, by the way. His son is Chris Mannix. If any of you are NBA fans or boxing fans, he's the leading writer for Sports Illustrated for boxing, and he's always on NBC Boston or on the national NBA following. But his dad, Dennis, was the police chief here. And so Dennis is a curious guy, and he and I were talking about law and authority, and he said, hey, I know you're involved in Bitcoin, I'd like to learn. And so this guy has just gone deep down the rabbit hole, and I just saw him a couple of weeks ago, and he's thrilled, right? Because he was buying this stuff back at 25,800 and is this is great. And so I guess the lesson there is, if he's open-minded, the curious, open-minded ones will learn, and I think that's our job. I like your list that you laid out, and I think we're each different. Some of us are crusaders. I think Larry does view himself as a warrior, which is wonderful, right? And that's why he gives so much of his time and energy to Twitter. And I feel like I just didn't have the capacity to do that because my kids are younger and things like that. But I look, we all have a duty, but at the same time, I think you got to wait for something that is willing to be open-minded and curious to learn. So.
Yeah, and the frame that I always try to do it is I imagine there's 15% of people who have the ability to change their mind and to learn over time, and a whole bunch of followers. That's just the way it is, right? You got to get the key people, and everybody else will come along. Okay, the other thing we were going to talk about, and just to lay this out, we were going to talk a little bit about the election. Now, one of the things I love about Bitcoin that we don't give it enough credit for is it has this amazing ability, because we all have this common denominator of freedom. It has this amazing ability to bring us all together from all aspects of the political spectrum. And when I ran for parliament many years ago, it's one of the creepiest things to get involved in a political party, because political parties are cults. They really are. And
As is
Bitcoin. Yeah. But Bitcoin is a cult off the system, right? With no leader, exactly, exactly. But I think what I can't tell you. I've told this to political people as well, saying the reason I love the people in Bitcoin is because now I have friends who have completely different political worldviews than I do, but we can at least engage. We found a common denominator that allows us to talk, and that's the frame of which I think we should discuss a little bit of the election just as topical, and then we can get into Q&A as we had discussed prior. So we know all politicians are what they are. And what's your opinion and views of where we're going? Who do you think is going to win the election? Let's do some speculation time. What effect is that going to have on Bitcoin and maybe macro more broadly? And are you optimistic where we're going, or are you pessimistic? All right, that's for you. Pessimistic.
Well, so our political system is so badly broken. Yeah, it's shocking that these are our two choices because they're both bad choices. One more bad than the other, in my view. I mean, to answer your question of what's going to happen, David and I work with a third guy who's not here tonight. I think if this is a fair election, I think Trump runs away with it. I think it's obvious. I don't think there's any support for her, and I think that's a good thing in general. I mean, I think of two very bad choices, I think he's much better than she is. I mean, she wants to take us down a statist socialist path, and that will completely ruin this country, as far as I can tell. But there are a lot of things about him that I don't like as well, including his personal behavior and the fact that he's a shitcoiner and et cetera, et cetera. So, you know, I mean, don't get me started there, but you got to make a choice. You know, that's my choice. And that would, I'm married to David's sister, by the way. That would get me in a lot of trouble at home because sadly my wife has not done the deep dive on this that David and I have done. But anyway, that's how I see it. Now, what I should allude to though is that we have a very smart third partner who helps us out in the business that we're running, and he's absolutely convinced that she's going to win, not because she's going to get the most votes, but because, as Stalin says, it's who counts the votes that matters. And he's read enough to believe that there was significant tampering with the last election, which I'd say there's some evidence of that, and that they can do it again. So, and heaven help us if they do. But to be honest with you, I mean, I'm writing a book on this whole topic right now. These are all just kind of players on a chessboard that really don't matter. I mean, neither of these two people are going to be historically significant. I mean, the next historically significant president in my mind is Michael Saylor when he runs in 12 years. He's going to be the richest man in the country. He's going to understand what sound money is. The monetary system is going to have collapsed, and he's going to stand up and say, "Here's how we're going to make America great again. We're going to."
God, Sackler.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, and we're going to build out nuclear power. We're going to go back to the founding principles of this country. We're going to have Satoshis are going to be the monetary standard, et cetera. So I think there's an extremely bright future after we clean out all the rubbish that we've now got in the political system. But, right now, I mean, I'm writing this book because, I look at this country and I see everybody fighting blue team, red team within families. And I mean, it's horrific. And both teams suck. I mean, they both completely and utterly suck. I mean, the only person who was even semi-qualified to be president in this race, in my opinion, was RFK Jr. And he's kind of on Trump's team. So I lean heavily towards Trump, but I think David says that there's no way that they're going to cheat on the votes. I'm skeptical. I'm not where our third partner is, and he's like, no, it's a 90% lock. She's going to cheat on the votes, and she's going to be our president. Let me say this: if we wake up after the election day and she's president, we will know that we have formally become a banana republic. I mean, there will be literally no doubt, because
worse, like Canada.
Whatever. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and there'll be literally no doubt, because from what I can see, he ought to crush her, just absolutely crush her. So that's how I see it.
Yeah, and I think just to build on that, I mean, I think if you look at the stock market, and this is what we've been talking about a lot the last few months, is about, how do you hedge the portfolio around elections. But I think if you look at the stock market and what it's pricing in addition to the poly markets and all that, it's clearly that Trump has the inside track to pull off there's like 7 swing states that matter, right? It's Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, Nevada, and Arizona in the West, and then North Carolina, Georgia. And you can Google electoral map interactive and you can play with it. And you can see kind of, you put the puzzle together, like she needs to like Mary Lou Retton stick the landing on a lot of those states, whereas he just needs a couple and boom, he's got it and everything's leaning his way. And then moreover, I think the Republicans seem to be in a good position for the House and the Senate. So if he gets that landslide victory, I think the markets are going to euphorically say, okay, he's cutting taxes. He's going to go cut a deal, stop funding Iran and slow the Middle East down and back off the Ukraine deal. And suddenly you might have people saying, oh my gosh, here we go. He can solve it. And yet, as Larry said, probably by March or April, the world will realize debt is debt, math is math. And this is a demographic challenge that we've got with the aging boomers and the fact that death rates went like that since 2015 in the world. And this is a global problem of debt. This isn't just the U.S. So I think that, at some point the honeymoon will be over. But I think that's what we're witnessing. And to Larry's point, I think our view is that if you look at, in my opinion, when you look back at this, and I like to believe that, maybe Joe Kennedy, the father in 1960, could rig Cook County, but to try and do that over this many counties with this much of a lead, where, I think Trump's gonna have proven it's been too hard to rig. Now, I think we'll look back and you'll say, look, what were some of the telltale signs along the way, the canaries in the coal mine? It was the Alex Cooper podcast interview with Kamala, where only 100,000, what's that, probably 20 through 35-year-old women watched that. 100,000 people only. And then Oprah with Kamala, and it was like 300,000 women watched that, and that's probably a higher age demographic of women. The point is, Kamala's not resonating. And I think people in America, even moderate Democrats, are upset, feeling they got lied to about Biden. The guy was, weekend at Bernie's type president, and they tried to fool us. And then Kamala is a really weak candidate. I mean, she really is one of the weakest candidates you've ever seen, right? And I'm an independent, full disclosure, and I agree with Larry. I don't like politicians. I don't like Trump's tone, but I don't think he's fallen in love with any of these people. They're very much self-serving, generally speaking. But so I think to land the plane, I think the high probability is that Trump wins. I respect our other colleagues' view that, hey, but there's about 17 counties in 2 or 3 of those states. If you rig it, you might find it. And the fact that we have these early voting where you can mail in your ballot made this a really dangerous thing. I think that we should be back at a day where you vote on November 2nd and it should be a holiday, and that's that. It would slow down the rigging process. So I respect that. I just think there's a groundswell of the lack of support for her and a lot of people being like, this guy's the lesser of all evils. Couple last thoughts to land a plane. Like I think that Bitcoin on a Trump victory and the stock market, I think, are going to rally with that view that he's going to kind of save the world for 3 to 4 or 5 months after. I think that's probably your next moonshot where you break through the 73,000 all-time high. Feels like we're breaking out of that 68,800 channel that we've been in. So it's setting up for that. And I think, as Larry said, last point, if Kamala were to win and our colleague was right, I think everyone's going to conclude this was a rigged election, that the media is spinning things. And I think you're going to see people run to things like sound money assets and hedge. I think Bitcoin could possibly get sucked down into a market sell-off. I think gold probably rallies massively through that. And I think that's probably how these things would play. But again, to me, I think that the markets the consensus is telling you. Now, that always scares you a little bit too, right? Because there could be a rug pull moment. But anyhow, I'm being long-winded, but that's how I'm thinking about it.
So I'm Canadian, so I'm not gonna weigh in too much on it. I mean, I hope the best for America because you guys are what leads the world, whether you like it or not. I'm shocked that you guys. I'll give you a little insight. This question we have is, why do you use voting machines? What's the point? Do they make it more accurate? Is it a better result? Is it a quicker result? Is it cheaper, more efficient? In Canada, we were shocked in 2020, especially those of us who have experience running for the Conservatives, that you guys were voting using voting machines. And this is not, a critique of any company. Coomer, relax. They have their office down the street from my old office. Because in Canada, we use voting machines for our nominations, which is the equivalent of primaries. And the reason we use them is to rig our nominations. I had people, lobbyists in my party, tell me that directly. Yeah, we use them because they just give us the result that we want. And then when we find you guys are using that in a general, what are you, crazy? Like in Canada, it's still all pencil and paper because, of course, we rig the nominations. We don't have to rig the general. But for us, it was just crazy. But a sign of hope. I was at Unconfiscatable at Tone's conference, not this year, but last year. And I think it was the second day, I had a meeting with Stephen Hicks, one of my podcasters. That's what I do, aside from trucking, is I write for a newspaper and I have a podcast company. And one of my podcasters, his name is Stephen Hicks. If you've heard of the book Explaining Postmodernism that Jordan Peterson frequently references, that's Stephen. The whole modern interpretation of postmodernism, that was his thesis. And I think his doctorate thesis, if I'm not mistaken. Very libertarian, non-politically partisan guy. So we had to have a meeting on the second day of Unconfiscatable before I went to the convention center. So we get on Zoom call, and Milei had just been elected. And I said to him, by the way, I know you go to Argentina a lot because his wife is Argentinian, as he's trying to learn Spanish. And I said to him, what do you think of Milei? And he says, oh, I know him quite well, actually. He said, Maria knows him very, very well. Like how? Well, he basically told me this very long story, but he inferred this is how it happened. That the people in business and in politics and in academia were very concerned about a leader like Kushner getting back into power. And they saw full out communism on the horizon if it doesn't stop. So they put their heads together and thought, what we need to do is we need to reach young people. And they started bringing professors who could bring these kids who are predisposed for Che Guevara type communism to come to Argentina and teach them about the free market and about freedom. They don't want to care about conservative, liberal, all that stuff. Let's just teach them about freedom. So Stephen and some other professors regularly were going to all the universities around Argentina and Brazil, from Fortaleza to Rosario to Buenos Aires, all over. And they did this for 13 years. And one of the people who frequently opened for Stephen was a local university professor named Javier Milei. So what they did is they invested in reaching young kids at university, getting them out of this echo chamber of socialism and collectivism, showing them that there is an alternative. They did it through the Free Speech Union, and the Ayn Rand Association also helped out. And they invested in this over time, and it paid dividends at the poll. And that's how we have Javier Milei in. And remember, when he was elected, they said, oh, the budget can never be balanced. 3 months, the chainsaw comes out, it's balanced. Which, like Elon Musk or not, he's a huge fan of Milei, and that's exactly what he wants to do with the federal government in the United States. So I hope you guys make the wise decision and that happens here, because the rest of the world is counting on you. Really are. All right, do you want anything else you want to say before we go to Q&A? All right, Q&A. Questions, anybody? Phil, do we have another microphone here or no?
No, I'm going to go Phil Browning you side.
All right, I'll be the Phil Browning. There you go.
Hi everyone, I'm Robin. It's kind of a question. It's that Trump saying so it's saying push crypto skip, and it's like right. So how is that? That's what it's. You know,
You know,
I mean, it's a step for spirit, right?
we saw him speak in Nashville, and you know, he basically said he wanted to make it a legal tender.
Fire Gary Gensler first.
Yeah, first, yeah, we got a lot of cheers out of that, which that needs to happen. You know, Trump's understanding of Bitcoin and crypto and the differentiation between the two is rather thin in our view. Well, yeah, I mean, you're aware he's done a, what's it called, Liberty's coin. He's done a shit coin. There's a name for it. Yeah, yeah, and he tried to sell a shit coin, and apparently he was trying to raise $300 million, and he only suckered 12 million people into it, $12 million worth of money into it. But I mean, sadly, you know, Trump can't get out of his own way, and everything is about Trump and making money, right?
Embarrassed.
It is. It's terrible. But compared to the alternative, I think he will. I mean, in particular because, as you'll recall, a year or two ago, he was pretty anti-Bitcoin. And I think two things happened. I think Vivek got to him when he was considering Vivek as a VP. And now he's got Kennedy on his team. And Kennedy is right where we want to be. I mean, Kennedy's speech, if you haven't taken the time to listen to Kennedy's speech at the Bitcoin conference last summer, go Google it and listen to what Kennedy, oh my God, it is unbelievable. Now, it was written by Brian Estes, and his wife, who's one of us. But go Google Bobby Kennedy at Bitcoin 2024 and listen to what he has to say, and you will be extremely excited.
Just to add on to that, and Trump's speech was written by David Bailey in Bitcoin Magazine, and they have kind of a crypto slant, and there's some of that, and I think Donnie Jr. is involved in crypto. I think these guys, just like DJT is the stock, it's the public, you know, media SPAC that they've created. You know, they're just trying to make money, the Trump family, on this stuff. So I think, yeah, he's clearly going to fire Gensler. He wants to allow all banks to start custodying assets, which will be an interesting fight, right? Because the Federal Reserve will still be controlled by Powell. They're going to have more say, as Caitlin Long at Custodia Bank can attest. The Fed's been a real hammer and block here for her, but they are allowing the Bonies, the Bank of New York, to come in here and do custody. So he wants to do those things. And yeah, I mean, I think in general, he wants to just kind of liberate it a bit. So cuts.
Because I didn't want to question, sir. You think he's just saying that to get votes? Like he doesn't.
Oh, sure. That's the, oh, sure. Oh, sure. That's
Still, just
but yeah, yes, but I don't think he does believe in free markets, and I don't think he has an ideological hatred of crypto and Bitcoin the way that like Elizabeth Warren does, as an example. And you can bet that if Kamala wins, Elizabeth Warren's going to have a voice in what their crypto policy is, and that's a very, very, very bad thing. Right.
One last thing, like we had heard through the grapevine too, from pretty good sources, that in February, March, April, he approached Robert F. Kennedy 3 times and asked him about being the VP, because at that time Kennedy was surging with approximately, the thought was 10 to 12% of the vote. And Trump, to your point, said, I got to go get that libertarian middle vote. I got to get Bobby in here. And again, our sources say that, look, RFK said, no, I don't really like Trump that much. I don't want to be a part of it. I think what changed is RFK's went from like 10 down to 4%. He kind of saw his path was, okay, I better join him. And, you know, whether he's health and human services or what role he'll have in the administration, we'll see. But I think Trump's view is, I need to go get this libertarian middle that I'm losing to Kennedy. I better go embrace crypto. I better have a libertarian bent. I think that was that inside track as it was out in April, May, June. And it sounds like his sons were the ones that convinced him to go with J.D. Vance ultimately.
And the other thing I happen to know from some people on the inside is two things. When they did the Trump NFTs, which he didn't really understand what it was, and then all of a sudden a boatload of money came in. It's like, all right. And apparently Jared Kushner, who is the person he runs all his decisions through, knows everything about crypto. And he's been working with people in Dubai for many, many years, and is very positive on the space. And it's the NFTs that made Trump realize that okay, I don't understand what all of this stuff is, but maybe there's something there, and that's what started his Bitcoin journey. So, next question.
But that's our type of and for
Thanks. I'm curious if you guys saw the discussion between Safe and Sailor on yield. If you did, I'm curious what your thoughts are. I was taught by my dad when I was young, there's no such thing as risk-free yield. That's basically Sasquatch or the Loch Ness Monster. And so I'm curious if you saw it, and B, what your perspective is on risk-free yield.
yeah, I think that's some excerpts and then watch the whole thing. So somewhat half baked, but I'll take safe side of this.
There's a piece of Sailor that, I respect him a lot, and I think he's great, but this yield concept that he's got, I'm not sure I'm there with him on it. And so I would take safe side in that argument, what I saw and heard.
Yeah, maybe I'll take Sailor's side a bit. That look, if the Lightning Network takes off, right, and you need to get Lightning channels started with providing some Bitcoin collateral liquidity, I think those are scenarios where MicroStrategy could be like a bank, and someday this is valuable collateral. To me, it's different than paper Bitcoin that he's having fractional reserve banking type thing. Because I agree with your dad's comment, Steve, that there is no risk-free yield, and not your coin, not your keys, not your coins, and all that. But I do think that that's kind of where Selo was going a bit with that, of this vision of at some point in time, MicroStrategy will probably end up with, they got 250 to 255,000 Bitcoin right now, that at some point they'll have 2%, 3% of the total Bitcoin outstanding. Well, then he's just kind of like JP Morgan at that time of the Bitcoin bank, and this collateral will be needed by people perhaps for various reasons. And if he can earn a yield on that, it's not that he's doing nefarious fractional reserve type things. I think that's where he's going, but I, obviously Neil Clary's taught me more about sound money in my lifetime than anyone else. And I think that, I get that concept though, that look, we gotta avoid the paper gold issues that came out there. And I don't know if you want to into that.
No, I'm not. Yeah, I think the risk of paper Bitcoin is fairly low, and there's actually an intermediate position where, using Bitcoin to provide Lightning liquidity might actually the people who want to use that Lightning. One of the great paradoxes about the Lightning Network, in my view, is that how can you have this network work if there's no money in it for the people who are running it? And I think part of the reason why it hasn't developed very well is that there's no way to make money doing it. And so, so if we really want to have this grow into a medium of exchange, which I think we do, because as Jeff Booth says, that's what prevents us from being 6102'd. There are going to be companies and organizations that will provide big, robust Lightning channels. And that to do that, you have to pay a fee. You can't. Like if I want to send somebody $1 million on Lightning, I can't do that, right? In fact, I gave somebody $1,500 the other day on Lightning, and it took almost 6 hours for it to move and get confirmed. And the fee was several dollars, which isn't bad, but the point is, and the reason was just because it went in little pieces and the liquidity wasn't there. So. There's going to have to be a 5 or 10, it doesn't have to be MasterCard like, where people are taking 300 basis points on every transaction. But to get Lightning to work, I think that the devs are going to have to figure out a way to give, 5, 10, 15, 20 bips on the movement of money, because otherwise nobody will set up the technology to make the money move. You know what I mean? And maybe if that's what Sailor's talking about, I'm fine. Like I said, I didn't see it, so I'm kind of commenting half cooked for having. I read of it and I saw pieces of it. I didn't see the entire debate. I think Safe has a view of how this is going to develop that's very unique, and just based on how smart he is and what he's written and done, I tend to I lean towards his view very strongly.
I know. I didn't see it, so if you know what you're talking about.
I have the same question.
One quick comment, but then my question. I am concerned with Elon saying he's going to, doge the U.S. government, and so that's going to lose a lot of votes, which concerns me. All those government workers. But anyway, I'm not smart enough yet to understand. We live in a Bitcoin world. We live in a Bitcoin standard. How do the people who never owned Bitcoin and didn't get a piece of the 21 million? What happens to what happens? Do we become the ones who were wealthy sitting on our stack? And can you play that out for me?
So
It's really just, it just moves. It's just, remember, it's just a unit of account, and there are 100 million Satoshis in every coin. And, it's going to get fully distributed. Do you know what I mean? I mean, people are it's a fixed amount of money. It'll be a deflationary money. And over time, everybody will get some, because, and what I think will happen is ultimately people realize that, there'll be a big Gresham's Law moment where people will say this fiat stuff is melting. I've got to buy Bitcoin, no matter what the price is. And so, they may only get 10,000 Satoshis, but 10,000 Satoshis may be the equivalent of, $500,000 today or something. Do you know what I mean? I mean, it just, because it's so infinitely divisible, and then you could even get into micro Satoshis, and that's way out in the future. But because it's infinitely divisible, all we're really talking about is a monetary system where there's a fixed supply. And so that doesn't mean that everybody can't have some. It just means that not everybody can have one, right? and one is going to someday put you in the global elite. And that day may be 20 years from now. But having a whole coin is going to make you and your family, one of the wealthiest families in the world, I think at some point. But that doesn't mean other people won't have a tenth of a coin, and that'll be a big deal too. And, the common worker might have 1/100th of a coin, and that'll be their annual salary. But, they might find that 1/100th of a coin is enough to pay all their bills, right? It just breaks down. Go ahead. That's it.
Yeah, I mean, I was gonna say, I can go to a Berkshire Hathaway annual meeting one day, and you meet some of these families, and they're humble Midwestern people, and 1967 they invested with Buffett, or their father did, and now these people have made a fortune, and they're humble still, and the humble family, and they it's a cult. They love Buffett and Munger and all that, but it's like, yeah, their wealth just shifted. They became the wealthy. It's like as if we were all at an Amazon or Google convention here in 1999, and we all own stock, and we're thinking this Google thing's going to be big someday. It's really better than the Yahoo search engine. Well, now if you held on, you were there. And I think that's what this Bitcoin thing will be like. It's like we're all just shareholders, if you will, in a class that is in an asset that is scarce, and it'll be the scarcest asset in the world. And as Larry talks about, as you get into this Gresham's Law moment, where no one will want to be in any currency in the world because they're all forced to print, right? The big print throughout the world. Again, same stuff you saw in Venezuela recently or in the Weimar Republic. People will run to the scarcest asset, and you can't go find a Picasso painting to glob onto right now to store your value. And real estate's got a lot of negative things to it. But boy, that Bitcoin thing that you can buy in this phone and have in your pocket forever, like this is going to become a major asset class in those moments. So I don't know if that answers your question, but that's kind of how I see it. Is it'll shift that way, and you're just an early Apple shareholder in 1985 here.
Yeah, something would.
I just want to add something additional to that as well. It's also about when people come into Bitcoin, and I've seen there's two different conversations depending where you are in the world. If you're in Canada, the United States, or even the United Kingdom, we're looking at it as an asset or an insurance policy. But other places around the world, it's completely different. Their currencies frequently collapse. Argentinians and Brazilians are the easiest people to orange pill, believe me. But there's also the convenience. So you have, in the emerging world, you have an emerging business class. And when I did this book, when I finished the transcript with John and myself, I found a team that put it together, designed the cover, threw it on Amazon, laid it all out. Like, it was quite extensive, did the website and all that sort of stuff. And they are in Panama. And there are Venezuelans who escaped Venezuela and live in Panama, minus one of them still lives in Venezuela. So I hired them, they gave me an invoice, we signed a contract, and then I said to them, how do you want me to pay? And they said, oh, yeah, you're Canadian. We want Canadian dollars. And I said, well, why don't I just give you Bitcoin? And they said to me, oh, yeah. Ellie said, I have a Bitcoin wallet. I've never really used it, but sure. Okay. So we did this. I explained them how to do it. We did the conversion. I sent them some Bitcoin, and that was said and done. A week later, we had a follow-up meeting. I think it was a week later. And he said, oh, by the way, that Bitcoin thing. I said, yeah. He said, I'm now doing every invoice in US dollars and Bitcoin. I said, why? He said, it's so much easier. There's no friction. I don't have to worry about converting, pesos to dollars to whatever. And now when I got to pay my guy in Venezuela, he's happier to get Bitcoin than anything else. So it's those little experiences that people will have that you didn't even think of will come about. And I think that's going to be a big driving force to getting average people onto Bitcoin.
I just want to add to the conversation. I also have a dev that's in Nigeria that only will be paid in Bitcoin. And so they do work for us. They do development work, and we send them sats. It's instant, trackable, basically zero cost. We do it on a Lightning network because it's a small enough amount that we do it. But what I was going to say is, I think the focus here has been everyone will purchase Bitcoin at some price. They'll get it at the price they deserve, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But as well, obviously, in a hyper Bitcoinized world, people will be earning Bitcoin. So if your salary is paid in Bitcoin, then as you're bringing value to the world, as you're producing, as you're working, et cetera, you're acquiring Bitcoin the same way that today we acquire dollars.
Sure. I got a question for Lawrence. Early in the talk, you mentioned that during the great financial crisis, they changed the rules on you. Could you expound upon that and maybe add how Bitcoin might have helped out in that situation?
September. So if you recall, in September of 2008, so in late August of 2008, Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac overnight went bankrupt. They were the two big housing authorities in the United States. And then all the banks were rumored to be in trouble. And I think on September 15th, Lehman failed. Okay. And on September 18th, the US SEC came out with a law that banned short selling of financial stocks in order to protect the market. They made it completely illegal. So if you held a short position in any financial stock, you had to cover it right then and right there. So my fund, which was multiple millions of dollars, my money and other people's money at the time, I was short all of them. I'd made money on Lehman. That one I didn't get screwed on. But I was, and I made money on Bear Stearns, which had failed in March. But I was short, Goldman, Solomon, you name it, all of them. And Ambac, what was the big insurance company? The AIG. Yeah, I was short all those guys. MBIA. I was short Lehman, but Lehman was before they changed the rules. I actually made the money there. But so when they changed that rule, I was having a year where my fund was up about 50%, which as a money manager, that's a good year, right? Well, they changed that rule. And so suddenly I was forced to go and buy back all of the stocks. And the minute they changed that rule, if you go look at the stock charts, which you see, they all went up 40 or 50%, right? They short squeezed me out, right? Now a lot of them ultimately went back down to zero, but I wasn't there anymore, right? So basically they stole my profits from me by changing the rules in the middle of the game, right? So
did you have a binge?
Yeah. I mean, if you watch Dumb Money and watch what Ken Griffin did to the GameStop people. I mean, they're more short. They had more short positions in GameStop than there were shares. So I mean, it's just inconceivable. It's totally illegal. And then they changed the rules. They did this to the Hunt brothers in the 80s. The Hunt brothers had the silver market cornered. And they literally came in and changed the rules and said, you are not allowed to buy silver anymore. It's liquidation only. They just changed the rules, and they bankrupted the Hunts. So this is what the fiat masters do in order to protect their system. I mean, and this has been going on for decades.
Yeah, and it just quickly, I mean, the Citadel, run by Ken Griffin now, right? He's been bragging about this. They control 27% of every U.S. stock that trades goes through Citadel. Like they totally got control. And when the repo market was about to collapse in 2019, they were about to go under Citadel. That's why rules changed there. In 2000, during the GameStop thing, March 20, they were in trouble. But then on the GameStop thing, like literally, Michael Burry actually was all over GameStop about 9 months before it took off. He saw that the short interest was like 120 million shares outstanding short, and there's only 100 shares outstanding. And so he knew that any little thing could get GameStop to be squeezed. Unfortunately for Burry, he covered it like 7 months before it all took off. He got out of the position. But those guys you saw, it started squeezing, and Citadel was in deep trouble, and that's why they changed the rules on that and said, we got to protect the banks. So it'd be the equivalent of the Celtics about to win the championship, but suddenly you change it and say, no, you don't have the shot clock allowed for you guys. It's only 1 second. This is what they're doing. And so I'll pause there, but.
I just have a quick question on what Linda had said. I met her earlier. As far as Bitcoin goes, one Bitcoin, right? Is it a set amount of certificates each Bitcoin? It's going to be worth so much money. One Bitcoin eventually. That's why 21 million is going to make it the 800 million world be able to use it, right? It has to increase, right? Mathematically, it's impossible not to. So the number of Satoshis, am I saying that right? I'm not going to increase.
Right.
And how many are in one Bitcoin? 100 million in one Bitcoin?
1 point. That's why.
And then
Satoshi today is worth 0.0007 of a penny.
What? Sorry?
One Satoshi is 0.0007.
100, that's worth 1,000. So 21 million times 100 million. That pretty much is right. It's on quadrillion. It's about 6 of 1. That's how it's gonna. That's like. So if you subdivide the world in microseconds, so one guy here, and that's how it's gonna work. But I got that. I was until I know we're gonna increase no fear like no. So the carry you guys down, increase can 100. I get it.
It all stays the same. It all stays. There's a fixed number of monetary there.
She touches on something that's important that links back to what we were discussing before, influencing people, persuading people, and whatever. I find with people who are new to Bitcoin, who are not financial people, when they see $70,000, they get scared. They don't know what that means, right? That's right. I can't afford it. So you know what I do? I tell them the price, the conversion, dollar per Satoshi. So they say, how much is Bitcoin? I say, well, today it's 1,000 Satoshis per Canadian dollar. So then they don't know what that means, but it's only $1. They can process it more easily. So when you're dealing with people who are not financially savvy, do the dollar to Satoshi conversion just to start the conversation. I've had a lot more luck that way.
Otherwise, they see 68,000. I can't afford that today on the market.
That's right. Anyone else?
All right, we'll take just 2 more quick questions, and then we'll have to wrap after that.
Hi, guys. Thanks for giving your time. Everyone appreciates it. So 2-part question. Your views on the hoarding of gold by the BRICS nations, how that's going to affect the U.S. dollar. And since China is a part of the BRICS, your thoughts on them eventually unbanning Bitcoin and what that will do to the demand for it.
I guess I'll go first on, I think that the dollar is one of the hardest, assets or commodities or currencies to predict in the world. There's so many variables, right? Whether that's that Brent Johnson argument at Santiago Capital of the milkshake theory and the euro dollar bond market that creates this demand for dollars. And even though JP Morgan estimates that over 25% of oil last year traded outside the US dollar, right? Whereas historically 100% of all oil trades happen and placed in dollars. That's changing. To me, it's not about the dollar. What the BRICS thing is about is the fact that they're not, if I'm in China and I'm buying oil from Saudi Arabia or Russia and I am allowed to pay yuan now, and we don't even deal with the dollar at all between Saudi Arabia and China, well, there's less dollars in the system, less dollars that then need to be reinvested by the Saudi Arabian oil person or the Chinese small business person that sold widgets or whatever. They don't have dollars they got to reinvest in, I guess I'll just buy treasuries. That to me is a story that it's the lack of buyers of treasuries that's the real dilemma for the U.S. And that's where this could get really chaotic and crazy someday. And yet the demand for the dollar by nature then therefore is declining. And so that will be most likely a pressure on the dollar. But, there's things like we have 225 years of system of laws here that some people still have faith in the dollar, right? And in a world of chaos, if we get into a real global financial crisis. So I just think of it in terms of losing natural buyers of treasuries. And that's why Janet Yellen and them like stable coins, because the tethers of the world are going to be buying T-bills all the time. So those guys get free passes down in Washington from regulatory standpoint, because that's the friend of the Treasury for sure. So I guess that's point one. And then sorry, your second question was
China, since they're a bridge nation, eventually unbanning Bitcoin being implemented.
Yeah, I don't know. You want to go on that one, or do you have thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, so it's banned there, but there are VPNs there, and a lot of Chinese citizens own it. And actually, they're still mining it quite heavily. So, that's a perfect case of how, Bitcoin's bigger than these governments. It's going to get around them. But let's go back to the gold thing for a minute, because the dollar being what it was and the reserve currency of the world, and I'm sure you're familiar with Triffin's dilemma. It's hollowed out our manufacturing base, and it's really a problem that we don't have a neutral reserve currency, right, in the world. It's created a very unbalanced world in terms of trade and everything else. And it's allowed the U.S. to live way beyond its means at the expense of the rest of the world. And the rest of the world's getting fed up with it. And so when we grabbed the $600 billion of Russian reserves, the world kind of woke up and said, okay, we've had enough. We're going to do something else. And the Bitcoin market's not big enough or developed enough for sovereigns to really start sovereigns deal in terms of billions and billions, arguably even sometimes trillions. And the entire Bitcoin market is 1 trillion, and part of it that's liquid is certainly less than 1 trillion. So, because a lot of it is in our hands, we're all hodling it, we're not selling it. So, at a higher price we might, but the point is, I think that in the move from where we are today, which is a broken fiat system, to a sound money system, which I think is the big fourth turning event that's occurring right now, the first step will be to do it in gold, and that gold will then be followed by Bitcoin. Bitcoin will flip gold. And Bitcoin is a much better investment than gold. But gold's got a 5,000-year Lindy effect, and Bitcoin's got a 15-year Lindy effect. And so what we clearly see right now, we see evidence of it everywhere, is that the dollar is being dethroned. This is like the pound losing its reserve status after World War I, right? And it's being dethroned again. And we are going back to a natural world trade gold system based on the choices of all the countries that aren't the U.S., right? And that's just happening organically without anyone saying, I'm going on a gold standard. It's real simple. If China buys oil, pays in yuan, Saudis get the yuan, they don't have something in China they want to buy, they just go to the Shanghai Gold Exchange, and you can see the volumes in the Shanghai Gold Exchange are going straight up. And they say, fine, we got excess cash, we got excess yuan, fine, get us gold. Because they know the gold will hold its value. They don't know what the Chinese monetary policy is. And in fact, the last 2 weeks, China just came with a bazooka. They're going to print a bunch of money too. Because this is the thing. All of these countries have the same mathematical problem, which is that they have to grow the money supply in excess of, the debt growth, or else the whole thing collapses. And that's why sound money is such an important thing. And, you can argue about the upside optionality in Bitcoin and gold. Bitcoin's crushing gold. It's going to always crush gold. It's going to bury gold eventually. But when you're dealing at a sovereign level, they're not ready to buy Bitcoin yet. And so gold's going to be the intermediate step. So I think gold's going to 10,000. I think Bitcoin's going to 1 million, right?
Just to build on that, it's, a friend of mine's from India, and as he said, look, it's got 5,000 years of history, gold, and they understand it over there. And there's most importantly, is in the dynamic I described, both the Chinese and the Saudi Arabian example, neither one trusts each other. Neither one wants to hold but they'll do business, but they know that gold has no counterparty risk and has been around forever. They don't have to do the work on trying to figure out where Bitcoin's going. So I think that, and secondly, like, we're friendly with Stan Druckenmiller's old kind of one of his right-hand lieutenants. And as Colin made the point to me, he said, Druckenmiller loves Bitcoin and he owns it. The problem is with Druckenmiller's size, he can't go and buy $1 billion worth of Bitcoin without moving that market massively. Whereas he can get Goldman Sachs or JP Morgan in a matter of like 2 minutes to turn on a swaps trade that gives Stan $1 billion of exposure to gold futures right now. And he's got the ISDA set up. And so for those two reasons, you're always going to have like the Bitcoiners who yell at like us saying, you guys gold guys are a bunch of dopes, and the gold guys yelling at us saying you Bitcoiners don't understand it. Like, they both can win, and they're not mutually exclusive. Just like not everyone moves to New York. Some people live in Boston, and I think that and gold and silver kind of have coexisted. One demonetized the other, but they both can appreciate value. But as Barry said, I think Bitcoin at $1 trillion in a world of 900 trillion of assets,
Not big.
It's not big enough yet, but we'll get there. And
it's not big enough yet, but you see where it's going. Yeah, I mean, this is why. I mean, it's so bloody obvious to me that we're going to have 100,000, 200,000, 500,000 $1 million Bitcoin in the next 10 years. I mean, we would direct you to Fred Krueger's power law, which we think is very valid. It could get broken to the upside in hyper Bitcoinization, but as a downside case, an R squared of 97% over 12 years or so. I mean, it's inevitable. I mean, to us, this is the biggest no-brainer asymmetric trade we've ever seen. And what's amazing to me is that the entire world is missing it, and that just a bunch of people hanging out here in a bar in Natik are going to crush Goldman Sachs and all these big sophisticated people who have Harvard MBAs. And David and I both have Harvard MBAs, but I mean, all our classmates are. And when we go back there, these people are friggin' idiots. It's stunning to us. They just don't get it, and it's just because. I mean, the one thing about Bitcoin that I think we're talking about adoption earlier, I think is an interesting point. You adopt Bitcoin because you have pain. You're in the third world and you can't get your remittances, and somebody says, "Hey, this is you have a pain. You have pain. You adopt Bitcoin." Your government says, "We're going to grab all your money, truckers. You're screwed," and they did. And BJ steps in and says, "You got pain. I'm going to solve it." Right? My government screws me for 40 years, printing money, devaluing my savings, devaluing my earnings, changes the rules on me. I got pain, I mean, I look at a lot of my neighbors and David's neighbors, and these guys, a lot of these guys are fiat lords. They made a ton of money. They're not feeling any pain, and they're believing their own bullshit. They think they're geniuses. They think they deserve to have the wealth that they have. And what they don't realize is that they're just in on a money train that prints money for them at the expense of everybody else, right? And guess what? They're going to feel pain. It's going to be really great because Bitcoin is going to eat their lunch in the next 10 or 20 years, And so that's part of what's so fun about this. And I know that's not necessarily pleasant, right? but who said we have to be pleasant all the time?
Also, there's people who just, even when they have the pain and experience it, they can't process it. I remember being in a room just like this, maybe half the size, in Ottawa, right in the middle of it, when they started freezing account. Well, we couldn't get a bank account. We couldn't even get a bank account we had $10 million in GoFundMe. No bank would give us an account. Yeah, because Canada only has 5 banks, right? And they all said no. So I said to them, well, good news.
Get a phone call to say no.
Yeah.
I'm sure.
The best part is, so I had all these people around. I said, hey, good news. We got some Bitcoiners who are out on the street raising money. They'll be able to get money, so we'll get, fuel to the truckers, all that stuff. And what do? They turn to me and they say, that's for criminal activity. I'm like, oh my God, we have no money. You don't understand it. And then they all started debating, telling me about Bitcoin, the thing they know nothing about, right? That's how humans behave. They chase confirmation bias. They don't chase truth, right? So some people even can't process it in a time of pain.
Right, was there one more?
Absolutely. Fail. Stop. Not say.
Good save.
Quick reflex. It's $90.
I want to thank you guys for really interesting chat. This has been really great. I did want to play just a little bit of devil's advocate at the end here. I think everybody in this room, most people in this room probably believes in the idea, the philosophy, the technology, sort of the whole movement of Bitcoin. But why are you so convinced that we have to go around convincing people of this? Like, why would I, if I have the best bet in human history, better than Apple in 1985, like, why would I tell other people about this? Why wouldn't I shut the hell up and just reap the rewards of build generational wealth and the whole beauty of it?
Yeah, great. Question. So no, chat.
Yeah, no, I'll answer that. So in my case, it's because I grew up in a country that was much fairer and happier and more egalitarian. And I'm at 67. I remember what America used to be, and I don't see any of that anymore. This country is not what it was. My kids are growing up in a country that sucks compared to the country that I grew up in. And so I actually view it as my personal mission to, one, get us back to a sound money standard, because it's going to make our lives better in a lot of dimensions, not just getting wealthier, although we will get wealthier. But two, the other thing I see is I know that when this great Gresham's Law moment occurs, and it is coming, there's no doubt, in this fourth turning, a lot of innocent people are going to get hurt. There are going to be a lot of people who are hardworking and honest and have done the right thing and have saved their money and everything, and the money's going to become worthless, and they're going to be screwed. And if I know what I know and I'm not willing to share it and proselytize for it and try to explain it to people, which is why I'm writing a book, to do it, I couldn't sleep with myself. I couldn't put my head, I wouldn't be proud of what I've done with my life. So I view it as my personal mission to educate as many people as I possibly can on the incumbent danger that's coming our way and how and why they've got to protect themselves. And by the way, they'll also happen to make me rich, but I'm already rich and I don't really care. I mean, that's not really the issue. I mean, the issue is I want my kids to live in a better world, and I want the people who are about to get hurt to avoid that hurt if they possibly can. And I can't make them buy it. I mean, if they don't want to listen to me, fine. I mean, that's. But I'm not gonna be 80 years old and say, well, you knew about this, so you could see it was obviously going to happen. You just kept your mouth shut. You weren't willing to share it. So that's why I do it.
Yeah, just to add on to that, and very much in the similar frame, there are people in this world who are givers and takers. And I think the world is a lot better when we're all givers, not just for the world itself, but for us as individuals. There's a study that came out recently, another study that's reaffirmed something that's been studied many times before, that when you're in a state of gratitude and you've given to other people, you know what it does? It releases dopamine, the drug that we all get addicted to. This is why when you see people who go to church on Sunday, they always seem to have this certain high, this certain happiness that they may not have during the week. It's because they just spend time in church being thankful for everything that was given to them in their lives. And that's releasing dopamine. That's what we're getting in the Bitcoin community, is we're trying to help people, save them from some of the tribulations and struggles of their life. It It affects us individually positively and the world in general. That's why. I know that's a little woo-woo and, but at the end of the day, you got to do something in your life that has meaning. And for me, helping people discover that they can have true freedom and that there's a specific tool that will help with that, that helps give my life meaning. I don't know if that helps.
I'll be quick. I mean, I think just to build on his point, but number one, you can definitely choose that route. Like, we're not for us to tell you what to do. You can do what you want to do, right? And so I don't think any of us. I think that's a choice to say I'm just gonna stay quiet, no problem. But to build on BJ's point, I always just believe in the to whom much is given, much is expected, right? And secondly, I think Arthur Brooks is actually a professor at Harvard Business School, has done a really interesting study on the science of happiness, right? And as BJ says, you could argue it's woo-woo and who are convinced, but it's kind of interesting. He's really like analyzed thousands and tens of thousands of people, and when you look at it, like your happiest moment in your life is like at your 20s, and then like your happiness goes down because college is over, you start getting bills and bosses, and you lose jobs, and divorces happen, and kids aren't cooperating what you want, and life gets hard, and then at like 57, like you come back up the curve because like you've made peace with where you're at, like you've accepted where you're at. But then he talks about there's two curves that go from there. Like there's the people that turn into grumpy, old, unhappy people, and then the ones that are really just keep going higher and even happier at 75 than they were at 23. And it's those that have served others. They've learned it's not about them, and they've learned how to give back in their older age. And so again, you could argue that's some academic BS, but I think it's kind of interesting. And when you read his stuff, it's kind of really intriguing that at some point it's incumbent on all of us to give back and at that right stage of life. And so I think that's part of this Bitcoin community is it's our job to whom much is given, much is expected, but it's how we do it, right? We're not here to arm wrestle people to believe our way, but I think you're trying to help people out along the way. That this is probably, in my estimation, the single best asset class to invest in over the next decade and 2 decades. And if you can tell people wisely to have some exposure to this, that's smart. You're helping them out.
What is the and Arthur Brooks? And you can Google his YouTube video of Arthur Brooks. You'll see some good stuff.
Okay, I think just the last comment, and I'm going to give it over to Jeff here to close us out. When you have your bank accounts frozen like I did, it's not just your bank accounts. It's your bank accounts, your lines of credit, your business accounts, your credit cards. Everything got shut off. It was unbelievable. And I wouldn't wish that on my worst enemy, because that's really the government trying to kill you, especially if you need specialized medication. I run for parliament. I've run businesses for the past 20 years. I've always been an entrepreneur. I know people in the highest levels of government. If it can happen to me, it can happen to all of you. Don't think you can't be targeted as well, especially the nature of the behavior of our governments right now that are grossly incompetent and trying to scramble to solve problems they can't even comprehend. This is the insurance policy you need. And it would be good on all of you to try to at least communicate to those that you love, your friends and your family, to just get a little insurance for the future. Hopefully, you'll never need to use it. And if it makes them wealthy in the process, great. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.